Welcome back. Today we are going to visit inverse of a function. I'm going to show you how to rewrite a function into its inverse, and then I'm going to show you the proper notation to name it. And I've got some examples already copied on here. So if you guys want to get caught up, get your title, and then maybe write down the first couple, and then we can work them out together. Okay, so inverses basically means you're going to switch x and y. F of x is always your y, so that's kind of an understood y. This is just function notation. I've told you that before. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to bring the x to the left. I am going to leave this in terms of y. And now I'm going to isolate y, and then I'm going to have to rename it. So to isolate y, I'm going to add 10. So I'm going to bring the 2y over here to the left. And then divide everything by 2. So I get y equals x over 2, and then 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now, since I have a y here, and then I have an f of x that I renamed it with, the function notation uses a superscript, and we're going to call it f inverse of x. So it looks like this. So f inverse of x, that little -1 kind of indicates the inverse, is actually the x over 2 plus 5. And this would be your final notation for the inverse. Okay, same thing over here. So g of x is the same as f of x, which is the same as a y. So this is going to be my y. I'm going to trade places. So I'm going to bring the x over here, and then y plus 5 over 4. Now, in order to get to the y, because that's what we want to isolate, I'm going to have to undo this 4 first. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. The 4's cancel here, and this just becomes 4x equals y plus 5. And then I can subtract the 5. So I'm going to move my y to the left side, and then the 4x minus 5. Okay, so that is my inverse, but again, I don't want to leave a y there. I want to rename this one, since it's function g to begin with, I want it to be g inverse. So g inverse of x equals 4x minus 5. And that's my final inverse. Okay, so not so bad. Okay, let's keep moving. So copy down 3 and 4 if you haven't already. And I'm just going to do the same thing. So h of x, that's the same thing as my y. So I'm going to switch x and y. Now this one's a little bit different. I have that 1/6 out in front. I think it's easier if we just undo that like right away. I'm not going to worry about distributing. So the inverse, or the reciprocal of 1/6 is 6. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. So the 1/6 that will cancel with the 6, and this just becomes 6x. And then I'm going to add the 8 over. And then I'm going to move my y to the left side. I always like to have it on the left. So the 6x plus 8 will be on the right side. And then I'm going to rename this h inverse of x. And there's my final inverse. Okay, one more. So j of x, so that's my y. So I'm going to flip x and y. So notice I'm just kind of putting, what was attached to the -5, so that's where my y went when I switched them. So now I want to isolate y. Now this one, I'm just going to have to do the traditional inverse process, so subtract 2. I'm going to bring my negative 5y to the left, and that's just x minus 2, and then divide everything by negative 5. So it'd be negative x over 5 minus 2/5. And then I have to bring in my J inverse for my notation. Actually, this will be, if I subtracted 2, that'll be a positive 2/5, because I did a negative 2 by a negative 5. So that changes to a plus. And there's my J inverse. Okay, now I do want to do a little word problem. You're going to see some of these on your practice and your exit tickets for this lesson. So if you guys could copy down that little word problem, I tried to keep it short and sweet. Okay, so this is a function that's going to find the cost for mowing lawns, basically, the mowing business, and you have to know how many acres you're going to be mowing to figure out the cost. So, not to get hung up in all the variables, they do like to assign like the C, which is the total cost, equals f of a. That's a function of f given the acres. But in the equation, you can see they're just using a and c. They're not going to put in that f of a notation, but just kind of keep that in mind. For example, the first question is, what's f of 5? So that just means I'm going to plug the 5 in for the acres, right? F of the acres, f of 5. So I'm going to plug it into this function, and I'm going to figure out the cost. So just 60 times 5 plus 50, and it's $350. So my cost answer will be in dollars. Okay, now this question is saying find A in terms of C. Label this function G. So all I want to do is I'm going to go up to this function that I have right here. It says find A. I'm going to isolate A. So I'm going to leave them where they are. And instead of a cost function, it's going to be an acre function. So I'm just going to subtract 50. And divide by 60. Okay, and I'm going to rename that function G. So it ended up being G of C equals so I don't have to use that little inverse guy because we didn't technically call this an inverse, but we followed a similar process. We just renamed it with a different function. So what's G of 200? So I'm going to plug a 200 in for the cost. So and then I'm going to use this formula. And so you guys can use your calculator for that. Just do 200 divided by 60 minus 5/6. That's 2.5. So that would be 2.5 acres. for $200. So this one was $350 for 5 acres. And this is 2.5 acres for $200. I mean, that's the interpretation of those. Okay, see you later.